Welcome to the Curiosity Catalyst podcast. My name is Mitch South. It's so good to have you here. The purpose of this podcast is to be curious. Curiosity is the key that opens up the doors to possibility, which will open up a world of endless learning and discovery. Thank you guys so much for listening. Let's get into this episode. All right. Back in business. Sorry I missed a couple weeks, but I was in Lake Powell having a good time with the family. But it's good to be back. Man, it's fun. I've actually had this podcast on a back burner for this episode on a back burner for a few weeks now, and I've kind of been thinking about it a lot, and it was a fun one to kind of think of stories and just think of different things to talk about. So to start it off, the quote of the day is, "The harder you work for something, the greater you'll feel when you achieve it." At the end of this episode, I want to share with you guys a secret of success that I found and that many people know about, but you're going to have to stick around to the end to figure out what it is. Now, when I was a little kid, probably 3rd, 4th grade, I was a huge bookworm. I was one of those kids that you see carrying a book around with them pretty much everywhere they go. I was super obsessed. Just to even give you more background into that, I was so obsessed with Spiderwick that I would carry around this green little Spiderwick book, and I would take it out to recess. And I would play kickball with that thing. I'd play soccer with that thing. And I remember one day, this is random, but one day I was running, it's muddy, and I just remember slipping and bending the hard book cover in half. And I was crying and went inside. That's the only reason I remember even carrying books around with me. But I've always been a big reader. I love reading. And when we got into 5th grade, they introduced AR points. Now, in the 5th and 6th grade, they made it a big deal, and they had big competitions where all of the different 5th grade classes, they'd compete against each other, and whichever classes had the most AR points, they got a prize. I can't remember what it was. But I was kind of really into reading, and I started, I'm competitive as can be in pretty much everything, and so I'm racking up AR points left and right. And you get AR points depending on how big the book is, how complicated it is. There's a whole range of factors that kind of go into how they rank these things, but pretty much if it's a bigger book and if it's a little bit of a harder read, they're going to rank it higher. So right off the bat, I'd already read all of the Harry Potter series. I'd read Spiderwick. I'd read Fablehaven. I'd read a whole bunch of these fun fantasy books that you read when you're kind of a little kid, and they're big books. And so I was just raking in AR points. I was right up at the top of the class with some of these other smart kids. And I felt amazing, man. I thought they were giving me so much praise. Everybody thought I was cool. And I remember that I kind of figured out a little secret. So when I went downstairs, my mom, she kept a ton of these. There were these little books, and they were kind of like summaries of really big, really, really famous books. And so I started reading some of them. For example, some of the different ones were The Count of Monte Cristo. Other ones were like Les Miserables. And those are huge books, but they condensed them all the way down to about 100 or 150 pages. So you could finish them pretty quick. And when I read some of those ones, those were really long, and so they'd be worth 50 to 60 AR points. A normal book was like 2 to 5 AR points. So after I read those, I just skyrocketed to the top. And the way it worked was I would read the book and I'd go in to take the AR points. And so because I'd read a lot of the summary, I could answer some of the questions right. I didn't get all of them. So I didn't get all of the AR points, but I got a lot. And I just started racking up AR points. And to me, I felt like an all-star, man, because everybody was amazed and nobody could figure out how I was reading books so quickly because I wouldn't tell anybody. Now, a few weeks ago, I was talking with my buddy Caleb, and we were talking about learning new things and reading new books and different things like that. And I asked him a question that I already intuitively knew, but I just kind of wanted to get his opinion. And I said, man, sometimes when I'm reading books, it can just feel like such a drag. It takes forever, and some parts of the book are so slow. I almost want to cherry pick all the good parts and then read summaries of all the slow parts. So I don't have to spend so much time going through the drag. Caleb said, yeah, but that's kind of what makes the good parts worth it, is when you've done all the legwork to get to those good parts. Those good parts become more valuable. So that begs the question, why does the process of doing something make the reward more valuable? Why can't we just read the summaries like I did in the 5th grade and get the same result as the same result as someone else who didn't have to read the whole book? Well, in short, the world just doesn't work that way. And thank goodness for that. Let me put it this way. If you were going to build a kitchen table, would you want to hire somebody who's made thousands of kitchen tables, put thousands and thousands of hours into his craft, and made it really, really good? Or somebody who spent 10 hours watching a YouTube video who's never actually really done it before? The guy who's watched the YouTube video, he might have watched the experts. He might have learned a ton of hacks where he could whip out some process really quick, and he might do an okay job. But when it comes down to it, you want the guy who's done it. You want the guy who's put in the work, who's gone through the drag. And so, I think that we all kind of know this. We intuitively have this inside, and we understand this concept very well. But I think constantly we have to remind ourselves not to cherry pick and cheat the process. I think that we try to do it with more things than just reading too. We try to do it with skills, money, experiences, and wisdom. Not every experience requires the same amount of effort to achieve that high value. The same way that not every job requires the same amount of effort to achieve the same amount of money. However, there is something in pushing through those slow parts that makes which can be a drag while onto the path to achieving skills, money, and experience and wisdom that changes us. Something that makes us more than we were. Now, in high school, I had kind of an unhealthy obsession with sports. And I played basketball and I played football. And I'm 5'10", I'm obviously white, and I'm not the most athletic person in the whole world. But I was obsessed with becoming a starter in basketball, which is kind of rough because I never was able to start for years and years. I would ride the bench, and it slowly just grated away at my sanity. And this kind of drove me crazy because I thought I worked hard. And so I complained about it a lot. My dad, he would constantly tell me over and over that I wasn't putting in enough effort to actually become a starter. And it kind of ticked me off because in my mind, I was working as hard as anyone could work during those practices. But that's not really what he was saying. He was telling me that I needed to put in more effort even outside of practice. And to me, it almost didn't even seem possible. I was so doggone tired that I thought I was going to pass out after practice. Our practices were hard, man. And afterwards, I was just exhausted. So to myself, I just kept asking myself, why do I need to do extra conditioning? During practice, I'm working hard enough. And I just kept telling myself that I was doing enough. And that if I did extra conditioning, that during the game, I wasn't going to be ready. My legs weren't going to be fresh, which is hilarious because I never played. And so one day, I remember it was my junior year, and I was kind of fed up with everything. I was fed up with not playing. I was fed up that, people told me I wasn't working hard enough. And I remember waking up, it was like 5 or 5:30. I went outside. We live in Idaho, so we have like 4 feet of snow. And I put on my snow clothes, and I found the heaviest thing that I could carry, which happened to be a car battery. It was a dead car battery. And I remember I picked that thing up, slung it up to my chest, and I held it like this. And I just started doing sprints back and forth in the snow. I made a trail because I was doing as many as I could. And then when I finished my sprints, I do defensive slides, get down in a squat position, and just shuffle and shuffle and shuffle. I cannot explain how tired I was after doing these workouts. The snow would come up to my waist in some places, and I just remember feeling like I was about to die. And yeah, those early morning sessions were crazy. But for days, I felt like my legs were screaming, and I'd walk up and down the school hallways, and I just felt like a zombie. And honestly, I started doubting that it was even doing anything, because during practice, I was actually playing even worse than I had been before. And about after 2 weeks, at the end of one of the practices, and like I said, our practices were hard, man. They pushed us really hard. And at the end of the practice, our coach, he sent us to the baseline. And the baseline means you're going to run sprints. And I was kind of excited. For some reason, I felt good today. So we lined up on the baseline, and we get down there, and I'm looking side to side. I just remember I had this thought: nobody's going to beat me. I'm going to win no matter what. And he said, ready, go. And I took off. And I ran, and I felt more free and stronger and better stamina than I'd ever felt in my entire life. I was running as fast as I could, and I never looked back. I didn't see a single person in front of me, and not a single person past me until the very end. And I get down on the baseline. We've just finished up. And I look around, and everybody is dying. Everybody's putting their hands on their knees. They're sweating. They can't even focus because they're so tired. And I felt fresh. I wanted him to do it again, which was crazy. That's never happened to me before. And I just remember realizing and having that realization that putting in extra work and going that extra mile, it actually makes a difference. Now, I'd love to finish out the story and tell you that it was a fairy tale ending, that I became a starter and was just a rock star of the school, but that didn't happen. I never became a starter. However, I continued to improve. I got better and better and better. And by the end of my basketball career, I was playing big minutes in some of these games. And at the beginning of the season, my coach even told me that he didn't think I would probably see the court almost the entire season. And for most of the season, I didn't. I only saw probably a minute or two a game. And I just remember that feeling after the season was over that, I was crushed at first because I didn't hit my goal. But I realized that I'd gained something greater. I learned a lesson that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And that's to never cut the line. George Adair, he said something similar to this, not the exact same thing, but he said, everything you've ever wanted lies on the other side of hard. No cheating, no shortcuts, no excuses. The pain of the story is kind of what helps it stick with me, right? Not just the physical pain, but the pain of pushing past my limits and the pain of falling short. It's a long road that forges you into someone better. I know now that the long road is the only road. And that lesson, I think, is worth more than any starting position. The process of doing something makes the end reward more valuable because it's the journey that transforms us. I like to ask this question to myself a lot, and I ask it to other people too. But it's, would you like to have $1 million, or would you rather be someone with a skill set to make $1 million? A lot of people would choose that first option because it's just too much work. If someone offered you $1 million cash, a briefcase full of cash, would you take it, or would you take the skills? I would take the skills every single time without fail. And to me, there's something almost hollow about that first option. Everybody's always looking for handouts, man. Everybody's always looking for shortcuts. They're looking to cherry pick the line. And I think that there's something to be said about going through the drag. Now, all of those books that I kind of talked about at the beginning of the podcast, the Count of Monte Cristo, Les Miserables, and many others, I finally have read. I read Les Miserables close to about 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember when I read the skinny version, right? I read the shortcut version, and it's a good book. The movie, it's a great movie. I've seen the play on Broadway. It's a great play. But there's something about going through the drag. When I read the full book of Les Miserables, and I read the abridged version. I'm going to read the unabridged someday. But I read the abridged version, and when I read it, it got to a point where I broke down in tears. I literally remember bawling in my car, just at one part in the book. Things are so much deeper than they appear if you just read the summaries. If you only read the summaries for your entire life, you will be a shallow person. You need to be deeper than that, and you need to go deeper. And I think that's a thing that we're going to struggle with for the rest of our lives. So I encourage you to go deeper. As a reminder to everyone, including myself, I heard this from a military guy once, and it's kind of funny because my buddy Caleb, he actually used this in his podcast this past week. But it's embrace the suck, man. Embrace the hard times in life and embrace the process. Don't go away from it. The long road is the only road. Oh man, it feels good to go through something that you know was hard, even if you fail. Because if you fail and you do something shallow, or you don't go as hard, you always regret it. And so I just wanted to kind of help you guys remember that. Embrace the suck. It will add depth and meaning into your amazing life. At the beginning of the episode, I said that I had this secret to success. And I think by now you probably know what that is. It's that don't take shortcuts. The harder you work for something, the greater you feel when you achieve it. So that just ends this podcast. Thanks so much for sticking with me. As always, guys, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.